Hello there, and welcome back to the booth here at Pro Tour Rivals of Ixalan. That's Simon Gertzen. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe. We're down the stretch here, Simon. One more round to go, round 8, before we call this thing a day. And down in the feature match area, we've got John Stern versus Lucas Esper Berthoud, and they're all set. Let's head on down for round number 8 here from Pro Tour Rivals of Ixalan. Hello and welcome to coverage of Pro Tour Rivals of Ixalan. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Simon Gertzen. We are down the stretch here on day number 1, and we've got 2 players in our feature match area sitting at 7-0 and 6-0-1. Let's take a look at them right now. You can see John Stern and Lucas Esper Berthoud. The one on the right there, that's Lucas. You'll remember him. He won Pro Tour Ether Revolt last year. Comes from Brazil, and he's on kind of a hot new deck in Modern, 5-color humans. John Stern from Canada on the other side, 7-0, playing for Team Mastroff West. And, you know, John is considered an affinity expert. He's not playing it.
Yeah, I'm surprised as well. Looks like he went with Burn instead.
Yeah, he is on Burn. And, you know, he must have had very strong feelings about it because, again, getting really, you know, world-class good with a deck in Modern takes a long time and a big commitment and has a big payoff. And if you're going to issue that for something else, you're going to have to do it for a good reason. And that's what John's doing here. Yep.
Must have been his read on the metagame. Also very interesting. 3 Vexing Devil. We have not seen that card in Burn in a long time. And at 7-0, that's very impressive.
I remember that card.
And another thing, if you are expecting Lucas Esper Berthoud to be on 5-color humans with Collected Company, which we just saw in the deck tag, he's actually not. So some of these players of the Brazilians seem to have chosen to go with a more traditional humans deck.
Okay.
Although I don't know if I would call Experiment 1 and 2 copies of Classic Malcontents traditional.
Wow, look at that hand from John Stern. Spike, a bunch of bolts of various types. There is a Vexing Devil in there as well. That's the red for a 4/3 Devil. And when it enters the battlefield, any opponent can have it deal 4 damage to him or her. If they do, then you have to sacrifice the Devil. If they don't, well, you get a 1-mana 4/3.
Yeah, I mean, what else do you want? A single land and 7 burn spells for a single red.
Beautiful.
That Thalia on the other side of the table is kind of a pain, though.
Might actually lend... well, John's actually is going to cast a spell. I put that in air quotes because he's actually suspending Rift Bolt, which is going to get around Thalia for now.
This turn, right? Next turn he will have to pay 1.
Yeah, he is committed to that. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if he just uses the Rift Bolt to kill Thalia.
Yeah, that I think his hand absolutely needs Thalia off the battlefield.
Yeah, it just dictates that. Oftentimes, you'll see the burn deck, especially with a hand like the one John has, kind of ignore the creatures on the other side of the battlefield, preferring just to go upstairs, as we say, just targeting the player. But I don't think that's a luxury that John's going to be able to afford this game, as Thalia is really throwing a monkey wrench in the works. In they come.
Lucas choosing human again for his land there. That is, of course, relevant if he wants to cast something like Mantis Rider. Can be a bit tricky if you also want to cast Phantasmal Image.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, those little corner cases. So,
Meddling Mage on Rift Bolt. It has to be.
That's exactly what happened, and that is a beating for John Stern. His Rift Bolt just gets exiled. Just stays there. He's not allowed to cast it. Oh, man, that is maximum punishment for a suspend card there.
Yeah, the curve out by Lucas with Thalia disrupting the... They have like an instant printer there.
Yeah, that was
like whatever
fast.
you name just appears on the...
Yeah, Guillaume is our head judge for the feature match area, and boom.
He came prepared.
He certainly did. What if he just printed out every card in Modern?
Well, that's probably what he did.
And he just quickly sifted through the list. Now, interestingly here, John has found a second land, Simon, and that is going to let him have the ability to take down Thalia.
Yeah, which is something he will have to do. It's like you said, he would prefer to just shoot lightning bolts at Lucas, but the tax effect of Thalia is very real here. What is also real, though, is the prowess on Monastery Swift Spear. So as long as the Swift Spear is in play, it's actually quite a good blocker.
Yeah, it's not going to be in play for the moment here. Reflector Mage from Lucas Esper Berthoud.
So I don't know if you know this, Marshall, but this Humans deck, even though it wasn't ported from Standard, actually had a Standard equivalent. Champion of the Parish and Experiment 1 just reminded me of that. The time where you tried to play Burning Tree Emissary on turn 2 and just
remember that.
Explode onto the battlefield.
Yeah, Naya Humans, that deck was sweet.
Mayor of Averbrook to pump your team.
I do remember that deck. I remember it well. Got a premium matchup on our back table. Reid Duke coming in at 6-1, playing against Tsuyoshi Fujita. Duke's up a game in that one.
With Abzan against Tron.
Yes.
That is not what you want to see.
No, Abzan, yeah, I think, Reid was kind of banking on not that much Tron, but apparently Liliana did work over there.
Fourth most played deck at the tournament after the three aggro decks.
Which one?
Tron.
Wow. We did see it at the GP level.
We saw it in December. We saw in December that Tron and Scapeshift were popular, and Tron got the upper hand. Tron is the deck, the big mana deck at the moment.
It really has to be ultra powerful to be successful out here. It's a deck that is primarily played at sorcery speed and has a pretty straightforward game plan. A lot of the professional level players prefer to have more flexibility.
More instants. Even though the lands are powerful, maybe a bit less variance when it comes to these draws. But some of the best players in the game are playing Tron this weekend.
Here's Vexing Devil for John Stern. And Lucas with 19 life says, sure, I'll take 4. I'm not going to let you have a 4-3 when I've got you down to 7.
So something about this Humans deck, it just wins a lot of games so easily. Because the disruption just works. And then it almost feels like you could never lose. That's somehow how this game felt, because John's hand was fine.
Yes, it was actually quite good.
It was quite good, and it had interaction. It didn't have a second land, okay, but it just wasn't even close.
John says no blocks, but he is going to have to use one of these lightning bolts to kill something, preferably Thalia, most likely, so that he can deploy multiple cards next turn and try to grind his way back in this game. But one of the issues that he's going to face is that even if he does use up all these burn spells to clear out the humans, he hasn't made a whole lot of headway on Lucas's life total. Well, and here's a Kite Sail freebooter after Thalia takes a lightning bolt. Yeah, it looks like Lightning Helix is going to be the card. Remember, John has another Vexing Devil in his hand, as well as that Swift Spear that got bounced. Simon, you see we got a new Rift Bolt tag there too, a more efficiently.
Yeah.
You can appreciate that.
Less space.
Less space.
So that we can see more of the Meddling Mage. Yeah. I'm sure John is also happy about that.
Yeah. Yeah, he's just glad that everything's clearly labeled, as he is about to take lethal from Lucas Esper Berthoud. And that is going to be game number 1, going to the Brazilian. Both of these players are undefeated, though. Lucas does have a draw on his record, but now he is 1 game away. Remember, this guy, that's a Pro Tour champion you're looking at there, and a recent one, too, just last year. And he could be 7-0-1 coming out of day 1.
Yeah, and he feels that he still has to prove something, because that Pro Tour win came a little bit out of left field, out of nowhere.
Yeah.
We knew what Esper was, but we thought it was just blue, white, and black cards. So no, Lucas wants to show that he belongs on the Pro Tour, that he can play with the best of them.
Well, I'll tell you what, this is a good way to do that. We're going to have the conclusion of that match and much more after these messages.
Play Standard each week to win a special Standard Showdown prize booster. Rivals of Ixalan Standard Showdown events are being held near you. Find a location to play at magic.wizards.com/standard showdown.
Always know the right play to make? Show off your skills at a local preliminary Pro Tour qualifier. With over 2,000 game stores worldwide running PPTQs, find an event near you at magic.wizards.com/PPTQ.
And welcome back to the feature match area here in Bilbao, Spain. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe with Simon Gertzen in the booth. We're in round number 8. We're playing Modern. And let's take a look at our back table. Got a good one for you back there. That is Reid versus Tsuyoshi Fujita. And Fujita's on Tron. And check out what Reid brought in out of the sideboard there, Simon. I see 2 Fulminator Mages in the graveyard.
Yeah, that's one of the classic ways of dealing with non-basic lands. However, Tsuyoshi somehow got his Wormcoil engine down.
So it was actually a turn 3 Tron for Fujita. Now it has been since disrupted, which is a requirement. You do need to do that, but the damage may have been done. It is really hard for Reid to deal with a Wormcoil engine. That is the type of card that he's not particularly well set up for.
Reid is actually on chump blocking GOT,
yes,
unless his Tarmogoyf is large enough, but I don't think there are 6 different permanents, 6 different card types in the graveyard.
Yeah,
Creature, land,
so he'll have to chump block
sorcery.
with Goyf, and then he'll have to start cracking clues to try to get that Tireless Tracker up to size. And then it's just
how do clues and Stony Silence interact? I don't think that's a good
combo. Is there a
combo.
Stony Silence? Oh, no.
Stony Silence is great, can be great against Tron.
Yeah, this is a little bit awkward here for Reid Duke. His own sideboard card having turned against him, and in fact, not doing anything to Fujita at the moment. This is going to be a tough one for Reid to get out of, but the good news is, for Fujita, he's got one of the most difficult to remove cards, and we talked about Reid Duke having skimped on the path to exiles.
No, he might even be forced to double block here. Just to grind the engine down. Depends on the cards he can draw here, of course.
Yeah, he is. He's just going to double block. Look,
I mean,
if those clues aren't doing anything anyway.
Is a lot worse when you can't sacrifice your clues. Anyway.
Totally. Yeah, you got to figure that most of Reid's deck dodges Stony Silence, but he seems to have found the corner case where he gets punished for his own sideboard card.
On the upside, the worm tokens also can't be activated.
They can't be activated?
Yeah, all their activated abilities are shut off.
Okay.
No, but Reid is
you
actually,
really are about that upside, aren't you, Simon? I appreciate that.
Reid is actually doing a lot with the Stony Silence. All these
Yeah.
chromatic stars, chromatic spheres, Oblivion stones that you see Tsuyoshi could pick here are
Man.
just completely shut down until Stony Silence leaves. the
Reid
battle.
is like very awkwardly one green mana away from having a much more stable board as well.
Oh yeah,
Best he
because
can do is make his ooze a 3/3, which is simply a trade. But if it weren't, he could eat the lifelink token, go down to 1, and then trade off the ooze the next turn for the death touch token. But he's not going to have that luxury here.
which would actually deter the lifelinking token from attacking at all,
Right.
most likely, which would then enable Reid to cast the Abrupt Decay that he's holding to kill the Death Touch token. So actually being on 1 against Tron is not so scary.
No, that's true.
I think there's only Ugin that can be considered direct damage.
Yeah.
8 mana Lightning Bolt. And Tsuyoshi, I'm sure, will... Did he not realize that Reid has only a single green up?
He only is attacking with the death touch one? Is that right?
38.
Actually, that's the lifelink one, isn't it? It is the lifelink one. What do you think his thought process is here?
I honestly don't know, Marshall.
Okay, no blocks.
Especially why the lifelink one?
Right.
If you're concerned about blocks.
Interesting.
Maybe he didn't want Reid to be able to trade with the creature that is also able to trade with something like Tomogoyf.
Okay.
But that's a pretty high level play, and when your opponent is on 4, I don't know, just dealing damage sounds quite
Keep it simple,
enticing.
yeah. Well, Reid did use... He took the damage. Fujita is now at 41 life to 1, by the way. And Abrupt Decay he used on end step there to kill the Death Touch token.
We would have actually seen exactly the same had Fujita attacked with both creatures, because Abrupt Decay was already reserved for that Death Touch token.
I mean, we know that. So here goes Scavenging News. Back up to 2.
Fetch 1.
Is Reid... can Reid come back from being down from 41 to 1? Facing
Absolutely,
down
yes.
Worm Coil Engine? Like...
In this matchup, it's possible because you're not really playing against an aggressive deck. For Tron, in a lot of games, it doesn't matter if the opponent is on 120 or 50, because your game plan is not really damage-based. Even with a card like Ugin, you're usually not dealing 3 damage. You're just wiping the board.
Look at this situation now. Reid just activated Champion Event attacked. He's up to 3, and he still has a green mana left over to go up to 4. So even if his Scavenging News were to get removed, that's a lot of mana for Fujita.
That's very bad news.
Yeah, and there's Karn, and this is that death scenario here where he's going to be able to take out the ooze, but Reid will still survive this turn, though how in the world is he going to deal with Karn liberated and that token? Seems unlikely.
Tsuyoshi with the aggressive snatch there.
Indeed,
Let me-
I'll take that.
Let me take that.
And it looks like this is going to be it here for Reid Duke, though he is up a game, so this means that this would be going to a game 3, and that's where they're going to go. All right, we can go back up to the first table there. John Stern versus Lucas Esper Berthoud. Again, John, really well known, at least in Modern, for being a great affinity player, and he has left the robots at home. He's got mono red.
He'll be excluded from all those chat groups and
Yeah.
voice chats of Frank Carson, moderated by Frank Carson, the affinity aficionados.
Okay, there's an Ether Vial there for Lucas. He's going to put a die on top of his library to remind himself on his upkeep. Put a counter on it. And what did John do? Well, he did 4 damage on turn 1. Vexing Devil. Well, looks like both players are on 1 land openers. And traditionally speaking, they both can kind of operate off of 1 land.
Oh, absolutely. Ether Vial is actually a great mana producing card for the human stack. And John knows that his deck doesn't really need too many lands to operate.
This is slow, though, for Lucas. He'll start getting rolling next turn, and especially the turn after that. In the meantime, he's down to just 12 life off of 2 cards from John's turn. That's about as good as it gets. You're not getting any more than 4 damage out of 1 card, generally speaking. There's a Rift Bolt. Don't do it again. Don't do it again, Lucas. All right, well, look at this. Noble Hierarch into play off of the Ether Vial. That was on end step. So the mana problem's looking a lot better here for Lucas. And that hand full of non-land cards is starting to look pretty spicy.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the third Ether Vial in his hand, but otherwise definitely powerful stuff going on there. It is not going to be easy to raise the burn deck, though, from 20 to 12. 20 against 12.
Yeah.
You are on a virtual 9. If John draws a land in the next turn or the turn after, he has you dead without interaction. And of course, you can always hope that there are not enough 3 damage burn spells in the burn player's hand, but we all know that almost
never happens. Yeah. Well, a 0, a 1, and a 2 Ether Vial. Your turn. Here's Rift Bolt. He's not going to bother with the Noble Hierarch, so you're down to 9, Lucas, and plenty of damage in hand to get the job done. The one thing that John wouldn't mind is another land at this point to make sure he has he can deploy these in a timely fashion. But even that being said, it looks like it's going to be good for him. He does have awkwardly 2 Path to Exile in hand, no white mana source, and really not the type of cards you want right now anyway.
Yeah, the thing is, in Modern, we often see one-landers. What we rarely see is that the players just don't draw another land ever. We saw it with Ivan Floch. We now see it with both of these players.
Yeah, here's Direfleet Daredevil for Lucas, though it's just going to be a 2/1 first striker. As he didn't have any mana.
Yeah, and that's, I suppose, a sideboard card. Could be nice to flash back a Lightning Bolt every once in a while. Although you do...
Yeah, he's got 2 of those in the board. I mean, when you got Kessig Malcontents clogging up the main deck, you don't have room for Daredevils.
No, there are too many humans in the format.
Oh, and there's Thalia. That could be a major issue because Lucas has actually started to apply huge pressure to John Stern, and John's going to need to find lands. Does he even have it?
This is such
I think this one just slipped away from him.
Such a frustrating way to lose. You'll have your opponent down to 6. You have been in need of a single land for turn after turn, and then Thalia comes down and just shuts you down. And suddenly this human deck, it's threatening to just kill you in 2 turns.
Yes, he's going to attack for 9 here. As the board sits, that's without putting anything else like another Mantis Rider or something along those lines into play.
Which means that Thalia's Lieutenant is already lethal.
Right.
5 creatures on the battlefield. That's it. But even if you don't win this turn...
Even if he doesn't, John just isn't going to be able to kill him.
John isn't going to cast a spell.
No.
This turn.
Thalia just says you can't do anything.
And next turn... Oh, that's not enough.
3, 6, 7,
5.
9, 10, 11, 12.
Yep, 12. 2.
Go to 2, but there's nothing John can do. I mean, even if he doesn't die this turn, he doesn't have any outs here. Oh, he has... I mean, he's just staring at the tools in his hand to get the job done. And Thalia is just laughing at him.
Yeah, during draw step.
During your draw step, and that's going to do it. Lucas Esper Berthoud with a cracking day 1. He is 7-0-1. John Stern, hey, he's still in great shape, 7-1. He will take that. If he would have walked in the building and said, make you an offer here, John. 7-1 at the end of the day, he would snap that off. All right, we were going to jump over and see what Paul Rietzel was up to, but it looks like that game just ended.
And Paul Rietzel's on a pretty sweet deck.
What is Paul up to
He's
here?
playing a blue-red deck, similar to what we saw from
Pascal
Viren.
Viren.
But he doesn't play with Pyromancer. He plays with Madcap Experiment to get Platinum Empyrean
Oh,
into
this
play.
deck. I've seen this deck.
In game one, that's a super powerful card in a lot of matchups.
Wow, I would never, ever put Ixalan on this deck, ever.
No, but we said Modern is wide open. We don't know what Paul figured out in the testing process. And maybe he just figured, I want to play a deck that's actually not susceptible to Fatal Push.
Okay.
I think that's a very
interesting.
reasonable way of going about things. I want to play a deck that has a very good matchup against Burn and Affinity, because it's just very difficult for them to kill you. Or to deal with Platinum Empyrean in game one. So you also have 2 Blood Moon for a lot of the other matchups. I can get behind the reasoning. I've no idea if this deck is remotely good enough, because we're not even talking tier 2. We're probably talking tier 3 Modern deck. Definitely
But
less.
a metagame call.
Yeah, definitely less than 1% metagame share. This is, I would say, maybe the first real Fringe deck we've seen this weekend. And Paul, like you said, he's not really known for being a player that plays Fringe decks. He's known as an aggro player.
He is, though he will play whatever he thinks is best. He is a pro in that sense, but
Or
it
what
usually
he's-
just doesn't end up being these kind of curveball decks.
No, because that's also related to the fact that he trusts his teammates and his friends. So he will play something that Patrick Chapin brewed up. He will play the team deck, but this is just not a team deck. You just can't get the Ultimate Guard team.
Also,
to
one of
play that.
his real skill sets, Simon, is tuning. Paul is very well known for, especially at the GP level, he will go on to Magic Online and tune a deck perfectly. He'll work with Dave Williams. He'll work with Matt Sperling. They'll exchange information, and Paul really has a great system and a great mind for getting decks tuned perfectly once he understands what it is that he's trying to attack. And this is a little bit off the radar. He usually doesn't, I'm talking about taking known quantities and getting them tuned just perfectly, or maybe making one, big change to it. But, from a casual player's perspective, you might not even know it. You're like, oh, okay, I guess you have this other card instead of this one card. But this is different. He's taking this is a rogue deck, for lack of a better term. So let's see what he's got. Madcap Moon. His opponent, Lim Zhangyi, is playing a deck that we call Traveler's Shadow. Let's take a look at what he's working with here.
Yeah.
Death Shadow, Fatal Push. Do these sound familiar? Inquisition of Kozilek, Liliana, Street Wraith, Thoughtseize. He is running the 2 Tarfire and the 2 Teamer Battle Rage, and then he's running Traverse the Ulvenwald. We've seen this build of the Shadow deck before.
Exactly. This is the Traverse Shadow deck, and almost always you will see Jund main deck colors, but a Godless Shrine in the main deck to support the sideboard cards. Sometimes it's a bit cuter. We see, for example, Ranger of Chaos in the main deck already, but that depends on the metagame that you're trying to beat. I think this is one of my favorite decks in the format, just because it's super solid, it has powerful sideboard options, and even if you play against faster decks, you always have this out of just getting them with the Battle Rage.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know that some of the big testing teams that I went and visited and kind of chatted up before about, hey, how's testing going? What are you guys thinking? A lot of the discussions within the team were, should we be playing Grixis Shadow or Jund Shadow? And this is a fairly typical build of the Jund Shadow deck. And they actually are quite different. And you really do have to make much different decisions between the two about how you want to play them.
They're also completely differently positioned.
Yes.
One is better against Fatal Push, one is weaker against Fatal Push. The Grixis deck can play more like a control deck, which suits players like Ivan Floch. But the Traverse Shadow deck can play more like a real aggro deck, where you are just saying, do you have it? If not, you're dead.
You're dead. Yeah, and we do see cards like Teamer Battle Rage, in the Jund deck to just sort of slam the door on a game, and Lim has 2 in the main. So just land so far.
Is it go?
Very peculiar from
19.
Lim.
You could hear the surprise in Paul's voice there.
How is it every card in his deck costs 0, 1, or 2, right?
Yeah, but you can't cast your Death Shadows on 15 light. Well, you can, but...
Sure, but no Mishra's Baubles, no Flare, Goyf, something? All right.
You can actually take a look at Lim's hand there. Death Shadow, Traverse the Ovenwald, Collective Brutality, and Ancient Grab.
Wow, that is terrible.
So he doesn't have a castable card. But he could have Collective Brutality to get a look at Paul's hand, but he decided that's better if I do that later.
Now, he does have a lot of his bases covered with this hand. It just isn't a proactive hand at all.
No, and is Ancient Grudge even...
Temur Battle Rage off the top. He must have seen something that he really wanted to
Well, I
kill.
can tell you what he saw. He saw Platinum Empyrean.
Sure.
But will he see Platinum Empyrean in game 2
Yeah,
and
he
3?
could easily just
not have it.
Look at this Keranos, God of Storms.
I mean, Platinum Empyrean is kind of a one-trick pony. You're not expecting it to win 2 or 3 games for you. Well, you can't win 3, but I would think that there's a bit of a mind game going on where Lim just knows if I don't have ways to deal with it, I'm going to lose. So I need to have answers to it in my deck.
Looks like Spell Snare for Collective Brutality. And another Opt. Opt's seen a lot of play.
In all kinds of decks.
Yeah, right alongside Serum Visions, in some cases even replacing it.
In Blue-White Control.
Yes.
In Storm. In Grixis Death Shadow.
Yep.
And in Madcap Moon, apparently.
All the staples of the modern format. You know, I got to say, if I'm Paul Reitzel, I'm feeling pretty good about how this has gone. Lim just hasn't done anything.
Oh, absolutely. This is great. You're playing a deck that is actually very controlling after sideboarding. Your opponent is giving you a lot of time. Depending on how you sideboarded, you're just going to win with Keranos, or you might even have Platinum Empyrean still in the deck. But you're happy to play a grindy game if your opponent is just not doing anything.
Here's a good draw now for Lim, but he just is going to continue to not cast. He drew a Grim Flare for the turn. Uh-oh. There's a Blood Moon.
And we know that there are 2 of those in Paul's main deck.
Yes, he's going to wait on that Tarfire off the top for Lim. Another not great rip for him at this point.
I like that he only has 2, because it does mean he can't draw too many dead cards in some matchups. He also doesn't even bother with bringing in more of them, because it's kind of similar to the Platinum Empyrean Madcap Experiment combo, in the sense that if you win one game with it, your opponent is really not too keen on losing to it again if they have the chance. So you don't want to overboard on it. You just want to have these different threats available.
Interesting here on Lim's side, you can see some of the sideboarding that he's done as well. Yeah, he's got
how many hands?
a
6?
Terminate, a Tarfire, and an Ancient Grudge in hand. And so far, Paul has given him no targets for any of it.
I think he might have overboarded.
Maybe a little too reactive.
Yeah. It doesn't look like he's playing the right cards for the matchup after sideboarding. And also, I don't like how everything plays together. The Temur Battle Rage plan is not one you want to pair with a lot of reactive cards. It's one you want to be at your most proactive with.
This is Vendilion Click now for Paul Reitzel. So Lim was going to be probably excited to finally find a target for some of this removal. But again, this seems to just...
Is this resolved? Talking myself.
Paul is just very funny.
I love Paul Reitzel. So Paul is another player who is extremely cognizant of the rules and the procedure.
Untap, okay?
And there was also like
very communicative. He did not want Lim to show him his hand before Paul decided if Vendilion Click was going to target Lim or himself. And he's like, "Whoa, don't do it! It'll ruin the game."
We both know players that would have taken a peek and then said, I wanted to target myself.
Right.
And it's a very awkward
Paul is
spot.
extremely on the other end of that spectrum. Tim just reminded us Paul is also the type of player who asks, "Who are you targeting with your thought seize?" Right?
I mean, it's
you
great.
gotta be careful.
Paul is a Hall of Famer. He's clearly having fun playing the game, and I mean, he could have just said, "I target myself," and then this would have never even occurred. But he wanted to not give that information away.
Well, also the vanilla click was on the stack.
Yeah,
it had
exactly.
not resolved, and when Lim decided that it was going to resolve, which it was going to resolve, then he just assumed, But Paul was like, "I'm waiting for you to tell me that this is resolved."
We have a nice play here. Traverse the Ovenwald with 3 cards in the graveyard and Delirium.
Oh, that is nice. Very compact, thanks to Tarfire. And it looks like Paul's deciding if he wants to let that resolve. He does have a pair of logic knots, but there might be an argument to be said for, okay, well, you go get something, and then I'll counter that. He's going to go for a cryptic command, counter that, draw a card, and leave up logic knot.
Yeah, and suddenly
Paul just seems to be in a really good spot here. He's just facing no pressure. He's had infinite time to set up his game plan. We don't know what that is yet. It might be a madcap experiment,
I'm
but
sure
it also
he'll find a
could
way
be
to win.
Keranos. Yeah, that is the thing that when you first start playing decks like this, you tend to put too much of a pressure on, well, how am I going to win? It's like, you'll figure it out. Just draw a bunch of cards, get the stuff you need, you'll win.
Yeah, thinking about how to win is a rookie mistake. 4 young Pyromancer in the sideboard for Paul. Could also be a surprise weapon. And I wouldn't be surprised if his win condition in game 2 is different from his win condition in game 3.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense, especially given the sideboard kind of do-si-do he's doing here, right? I mean, we saw from the very get-go that Lim clearly has some sideboard cards in his hand,
and
including Ancient Grudge, again, which has seen 0 targets.
Yep, and maybe some of that is exactly because of how Paul won in games 1 and 2. Let's say, for example, in game 1, he wins with Platinum Imperium. In game 2, he wins. Actually, he lost one of the games. In game 2, he plays young Pyromancers, but then he boards into Keranos control, and has.
And you have sweepers somehow, or,
Are you
I love it.
with that? Yeah. Okay, so 12.
Again, Paul, very communicative when he plays. Similar to Reid, we talked about Reid and Yvonne Flock earlier and how they make sure everything's clear, that Paul does the same.
Yeah, I think Reid is a bit more serious and genuine about it. Paul always has this humorous undertone.
Hey, he's a funny guy. You can't help it.
No, you can't help it.
Here's a spell snare from Reitzel targeting that Grimflare. And opt off the top.
17.
Paul's kind of living the dream right now because he has been able to manipulate that library extensively with Serum Visions and Ops. Look at his graveyard.
I think Paul just wanted to play those islands.
Those horrendous islands.
He just came to the testing and said, "Look, guys, how can I play as many islands as possible?"
Of these islands. Another Vendilion click. That's some action there from Paul.
And that's actually a threat. Could this Vendilion click go the distance?
Absolutely. Like, that's what we were talking about. There's cards where you just say, all right, I'm just going to protect this threat. 4 turns later, the game's over. He doesn't need to do that, but that might be an option he wants to take. Let's see what happens with this Vendilion click. I think if he looks at...
Target you.
There we go, target you. He looks at his hand, he'll be able to craft a game plan around it, knowing that he's got double Logic Knot available right now. And look at that graveyard. I mean, it's going to take multiple removal spells. Now, Lim may just fire one off here. He's had a Terminate in his hand forever. Otherwise, his hand is double Death Shadow, Ancient Grudge, and a TBR. Teamer Battle Rage. By the way, that Reid Duke Seoshu Fujita match has just come to a conclusion with Reid Duke defeating Seoshu Fujita 2-1, and apparently there was an ultimated Liliana back there, and Fujita apparently enjoyed it as well.
That I can't believe either, but
I really can't buy that. Yeah.
The fact that Reid just shows up with his Abzan deck and then easily, well, not easily, but he defeats Tron, one of the worst matchups to go to 7-1. That's just
it's really
mastery.
impressive. Yeah.
Are you still done after that? What are you thinking?
remember, you do get priority again in your end step if something goes on the stack. And that was Paul. Again, he says, are you still done? Because you actually do have the option at that point to cast spells.
Yeah, and Paul is looking at 6 untapped mana, so he wants to make sure that there's no miscommunication. And this is a beautiful hand. Dispel Snapcaster, Dispel Logic Knot. If Lim doesn't draw an Abrupt Decay, I think his only way of winning this is to somehow win the race with his Death Shadows.
Try to Death Shadow, Teamer Battle Rage.
To take these attacks and turn them into something positive, basically.
Oh, here's Snapcaster Mage.
Target Cryptic Command.
Targeting Cryptic Command. And again, watch what's happening here. Watch how beautiful Paul has set all this up. You think, okay, cool, he's going to counter it. Look what he has left over. 2 blue mana for Logic Knot that can counter anything in Lim's deck if he'd like. It's so impressive how methodical and precise Paul can be as he goes. Now he knows he just needs to protect this Vendilion Click for a couple of more turns. Is that Entrancing Melody?
It is Entrancing Melody.
Wow.
And you might have expected that in the first 3 rounds today.
If you got lucky and opened one.
It actually kills the Death Shadow, so it's not a 2-for-1. But it's so beautiful.
Wow, and there's Dispel for Terminate. And this one is falling apart on Lim Zhongyi very quickly as Paul Rietzel is really putting on a clinic to go 7-1 if he can just finish off from here.
This deck might be even sweeter than the Thing in the Ice Young Pyromancer because of the immunity to Fatal Push.
I love that.
And you can just play circles around your opponents, which I think is why Paul is having so much fun.
Absolutely. He gets to just dictate how he wants to sideboard and just look over at the table like, you didn't bring an Ancient Grudge, did you? Right? And then, you know, the other time when he brings in the Young Pyromancer plan, it's like, how are you supposed to defeat these completely different approaches?
Yeah, and Paul, even though we know him as an aggro player, he can really play anything. A true Hall of Famer in that regard.
Absolutely. Here's another Terminate, though, from Lim. So he is going to force Paul to keep protecting it. This time it's going to be Logic Knot, and that's going to do it. Lim Zhongyi is going to scoop up his permanents, as Paul Rietzel says, I think I can counter that. And Paul Rietzel, the Hall of Famer, he's still got it. He is 7-1 to close out day number 1. Just another day at the office for Paul, but...
What's that?
I think I probably should have cast the 1/1 Shadow.
I still would have countered it.
Yeah. Early. I mean, very early.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe.
I think I still counter it. You know, I have so much counter magic in my hand.
In like turn 5 or something.
Yeah.
You have it?
I had those Logic Knots in my hand for like the whole game.
And that is true. And we saw Paul very carefully tapping his mana such that he always left it up.
Maybe I should.
And, you know, what Lim was asking there is he was saying, hey, maybe I should have cast Death Shadow way back, way early in the game. You know, he's not talking about a couple of turns ago. He was talking about turn 4, turn 5, when he could have, you know, cracked a couple of fetches, got himself to like a 1/1 Death Shadow and cast it, but he was reluctant to do so.
And Electrolyze is a good reason not to. You also usually don't want to allow your opponent to Lightning Bolt your Death Shadow in this kind of matchup. But he underestimated the control power of the deck of
Paul Rietzel's deck. Really cool stuff. That does close it out for the day here, though. We've got some commercial messages. When we come back, though, we'll be closing out the day over at the news desk. We'll see you there.
Hello and welcome back to the News Desk. Maria Bartholdi, Rich Hagan, and Paul Cheon. Paul, what an exciting day. Modern, it's a format lots of people love, and we saw a lot of really cool stuff out there today. And I want to talk a little bit about the metagame, because that's always one of the big questions we ask at a Pro Tour or any large tournament. What does it look like? Well, the top 4 decks, Humans, Affinity, Burn, Tron, and especially the first 3 highly aggressive decks that are looking to kill the opponent fast. Explain this.
You know, and I think just if you actually just talk to a lot of people about the Modern format, oftentimes people say, you know what, Control is not really where you want to be. In Modern, there's just so many different linear decks. It's really hard to prepare for all of them. So everybody wants to just be more proactive. And I think that's shown by just like people opting to play all these very, very aggressive decks. We had the Humans deck. If you saw Willie Edel, he was really high on it. Somebody who plays Thoughtseize and Tarmogoyf in every single tournament finally decided to play a different deck that's just looking to attack. That's crazy. That's when you know. It's like when you just see somebody who's like a one trick with like one specific deck and switches to something else, you know something's changed.
Why do you think Humans is so powerful right now?
Well, it just gets to play all the humans, and just over time, there's always going to be an extra human added to the fray. But I think the biggest addition to the deck is Unclaimed Territory. Now the deck just has perfect mana, and you get to basically be an aggressive deck. Willie talked about it before. You know, you can kill people turn 4 or 5, but on top of that, you have a lot of disruption as well.
All right, well, thanks, Paul. Nice name, Paul. Here's another Paul, Reitzel. Here he is.
Charles, my second choice.
Thanks, Rich. I'm here with Hall of Famer Paul Reitzel. Paul, you're playing Madcap Moon, and your team seems to be all over the place. Speaking of Madcap, what was the process like of settling in on all these decks?
Well, traditionally our process is we wait until Huey and John tell us what to play, and then everyone just kind of follows what they do. But Modern's kind of a weird animal. I think that it's really important to be practiced with your deck. It gets a variety of different archetypes. It's important to completely understand what your sideboard is doing and the purpose of every card. So for this tournament, I actually chose my deck well over a week ago, and so I've just been mostly practicing and tuning it since then. There's a lot of good decks in Modern. There's a lot of decks that are kind of similar in terms of win expectancy, so I didn't feel like actually choosing the deck was as important as knowing how to play it.
Now, we had a great moment where you played a Vendilion Click on camera, and you were very quick to stop your opponent when, in reality, they could have just plopped their hand down and shown it to you without you having chosen them as a target. You know, we always talk about what a great sport you are, but why is it so important to play the game that way for you?
Yeah, I mean, what we travel all this way to play on a even playing field, you know? And for me to win where I felt like I got even a small unearned advantage, it wouldn't be worth getting on the plane, leaving my cats and my cat. And so, you know, I want an even playing field. I demand it from my opponents, and I'm certainly going to give them, you know, the maximum fair shot that they deserve, and not an inch more than that. So that's just always the way that I've done it.
Well, that's why we love you. You're 7-1. Great job. Go see your friends and have a great dinner. Paul Reitzel, 7-1 here at Pro Tour Rivals of Ixalan.
Yeah, a true Corinthian is the word for that, really. Just, you know, absolutely wants the rules enforced absolutely fairly. He really values when he beats you as well. He's someone who really enjoys winning at Magic. He doesn't want it tainted by, yeah, but they forgot that this didn't work like that. Or he actually wants to just beat you and leave you certain that you got beaten by a better human being at Magic the Gathering. Which is one of the reasons he's the guy, if it was one game for my life and I thought I could trust him, I'd play him. He'd be my knight in shining armor, I think, because he's just an amazing player.
A very good choice.
But more on Modern.
Yeah, so we were talking a little while ago about the aggressive decks. Now I want to shift gears to control decks. Paul, you mentioned you're a big fan of the white-blue control deck. Do they have a chance here at this tournament?
Yeah, so I think the white-blue control deck, its biggest strengths are actually its matchup against the aggressive decks, right? You're playing a deck with Supreme Verdict, Path to Exile, and you actually just have really good mana as well. So, you know, you get to play less shock lands, like you see the Jeskai decks, but the blue-white decks, I talked to Jeremy Desani, not Jeremy, Pierre Dejean, and he was just like, my mana is perfect. It's the best it's been in a really, really long time. And as a result, I think, you know, if you expected all these proactive creature decks, Control is actually well positioned. The places where Control kind of actually struggles is when the format is kind of filled with a bunch of combo decks, because you're playing all these removal spells, not so good there. But I think in this metagame, you know, people expected a lot of humans. I think that was kind of the newcomer. Everybody wanted to try it out, and they wanted to beat that deck. And the way you do that is by playing just kind of the traditional blue-white control deck.
And it's a pretty good call, too, as most people here at this tournament are actually on humans.
Right, yeah.
All right, well, another player who's had a fantastic day at the office is Lucas Esper Berthoud. Now, he isn't perfect, not 8-0, but he is undefeated at 7 wins, no losses, and a draw. So let's find out how his day went. Here's BDM and Lucas Esper Berthoud.
Thanks, Rich. I'm here with Pro Tour Ether Revolt champion Lucas Esper Berthoud, one of 2 undefeated players in the tournament. A little bit of a dent in your perfect record there, but tell us about the deck you played and how it's slightly different than the deck your teammates are playing.
Yeah, I'm playing 5-color humans. It's a deck that was made possible with new additions from Ixalan cards. And it's all Willie Ado's fault that the whole team's playing it, except it chose to play Collected Company, and I went a little bit more aggressive with Ether Vial because it fits my playstyle better.
Now, it's interesting to me when we were talking about Collected Company, this is a deck with 30-plus creatures, and you said you can whiff with Collected Company. What do you mean by that?
Well, sometimes you hit the bad creatures, right? I think humans is a deck that needs to get on the board early and fast. And in order to do that, you need your 1-drops. But if you play a lot of 1-drops, then Collected Company gets worse. So that's why I end up not playing the card.
Now, you did a little bit of worked on your own as you do in terms of getting prepared for this. You have a job as a lawyer. You've made partner. Congratulations. What was your draft preparation like for this? How did you get ready for the draft format? Were you able to get enough drafts in? And if not, how do you make up that ground?
Yeah, I drafted a little bit on Magic Online, but I got to watch a lot of streaming on Twitch, especially Ryan Sachs and Pascal Maynard. They're really good players, really good streamers, and I learned a lot from watching them.
So you're using Magic players who are streaming the game as a resource to prepare for the Pro Tour?
Yeah, that's my shortcut, yeah.
Okay, now you're a lawyer, so I hope you got a good cut from those guys here. I hope you worked out some sort of arrangement.
We'll figure something out, yeah.
All right, Lucas, 7-0-1 here at the end. Best record for you on day 1 at a Pro Tour. And, he won a Pro Tour, so he's doing even better this time out. Lucas Esper Berthoud here at Pro Tour Rivals of Ixalan.
So Lucas Esper Berthoud, he's gone the distance at a Pro Tour, which means he's played in plenty of feature matches, a few on Friday, more on Saturdays. He came close to top 8, and then, of course, ran the tables on his Pro Tour Championship Sunday. But, Paul, it's very different for players who come in at 0-0, having played only a handful of PTs, and then we have our rivals table in the feature match area. So if you win, you stay right there. And Adriano Moscato has lived there basically all afternoon, round 5, 6, 7, and 8, and is our 8-0 player. I think he might be player of the day, wouldn't surprise me. Just how valuable is feature match area experience?
I honestly think it really depends on the player.
Right.
There are certain players who, when they know that a bunch of people are watching them, they don't want to make sure they don't want to make any mistakes, and I think it gets to some people. But clearly, it hasn't gotten to Adriano Moscato. He's also playing a deck that's fairly linear. You have the affinity deck. It is actually pretty difficult to play, but a lot of the times you can get those draws where you just play out a bunch of stuff and just get your opponents. But multiple times, especially even when I've been in these feature matches and it was like my first time, I was just like, oh my God, I'm here. Oh my God, I'm playing against John Finkel. What's going to happen? I'm probably going to mess up, but it's okay. I played against John Finkel, so sometimes you already go in with that mentality, and it is hard to kind of break through that unless you're just like constantly exposing yourself to that.
Right, and how much awareness is there of the all-seeing eye, the camera on the overhead, which is the shot from which we, as the punters back at home, watching with our feet up and our pretzels,
Rich.
come up. Well, and I am. Sit there going, we could do that. Oh, mistake, wrong land, wrong goblin, your turn.
Yeah.
How aware are you that you are exposed not just to your opponent seeing what you're doing right or wrong, but that there are a lot of people out there watching?
Honestly, personally, it didn't take too long, because once you just start playing Magic, you're just really focused on the match. And once you get to that point, you can kind of forget everything. I mean, these guys have all been hundreds, thousands of hours of Magic. And at the end of the day, that's what you're doing. And you just have to forget everything else that's going on. You know, sometimes I guess that camera is close up in your face and you're like, geez, there's, 30,000 people watching me right now. But at the end of the day, I mean, you came here, you qualified for the Pro Tour, and you have to pick up those wins. And you just have to kind of just try to let it go.
Yeah. Do you ever watch back video of yourself from key matches and just kind of analyze what you did?
Only if I win, because then I can feel good about myself.
Right, but you were obviously part of the Channel Fireball squad when you were at your peak as a pro. It felt to me like one of your great strengths as a unit was that you were all fantastically good at being minimally down when you lost and minimally up when you won. It was very hard to tell sometimes. I could come up and there's you and Josh Adelaton and David Ochoa and Luis. You're all hanging around and none of you look particularly happy, and there's like 2 4-0s and 2 3-1s, and there's no sense really of that bigger picture that we tell as a narrative, right, of coverage, because we're at the halfway mark now at the end of day one. And you're like, no, I've just finished one game of Magic, now I'm going to get something to eat, go to bed, I'll come back, then I'm going to play another game of Magic. There is no narrative of these many rounds at a stretch, and I thought you were a particularly great unit at doing that.
Yeah, I think, just all these grizzled veterans, they've been playing all these tournaments. They know that even if you start out 7-1, you still have another full day to play. I think the excitement maybe starts coming towards the end of the tournament where you're in top 8 contention and you only have 2 losses. But, if you have a good start, it means nothing, because we all know just, you can have just a string of bad draws and just be out of the tournament. So I think just being level-headed and just, trying to win one match at a time is very important to just kind of making sure you're very consistent at the Pro Tour level.
Is that kind of how you keep your perspective and keep yourself from going on tilt or something like that if you played a hard game or perhaps you punted a match or something like that?
Yeah, and then you go to your friends for support too. You're just like, I think I messed up, but at the end of the day, you still have a lot more Magic to play, unless you pick up that 5th loss, of course.
Turning back to Modern, we've seen what the big decks are, and big is a slight euphemism. I mean, the biggest deck in the field is Humans, and I think 43 players were on that 9-point-some%. So it's not like they're everywhere. Knowing what we know now about the format, where would you want to be positioned with your Modern deck, assuming that you come out of draft at 9-2, 8-3, and therefore still with a shot at top 8?
Well, given that the top 3 archetypes were all kind of aggressive decks, I would actually lean towards being a control deck, because, we really didn't see a lot of, combo decks at the top of the tables. They were all just linear aggressive creature decks. You know what's good against that? Supreme Verdict. So, I think Blue-White Control is actually pretty well positioned. Jeremy Dezani, oh my goodness, Pierre Dejen tested the deck a ton. They were both on Blue-White Control, by the way. But tested the deck a ton, and he came to the conclusion, I expect a lot of creature decks, and this is what I want to play in the tournament. And he also talked about Field of Ruin just being a fantastic addition to the deck. You get to just play straight 2 colors, and by playing the 4 copies of Field of Ruin, you actually have very good game against the big mana decks as well.
So when you were kind of hanging out with some of the testing teams and that kind of thing before the tournament, how were they approaching testing for Modern? Was it more of well, I know this deck, I love this deck, I'm going to play this deck, or were they more open to perhaps trying something new, like you mentioned, going into Humans because it seemed so strong?
It really depended on kind of a person-to-person basis. There are certain players that I talk to who just play one deck all the time, and those players are just yeah, I locked it in 3 months ago, I'm very good with this deck, I'm very confident, and I'm just going to focus on draft. I'm going to make sure I get 100 drafts under my belt and win. And there are other players, a lot of the members of, kind of the Team Channel Fireball team, Ultra Pro team, they're much more flexible. They tested a ton of different decks and just wanted to make sure they got the best configuration. But at the end of the day, a lot of those players also settled into the decks that they were most comfortable with.
All right, well, the last slip is in, and that means it must be time for the end step.